Good evening, friends, and welcome. Welcome to the MTC for a very special evening. Friends, we are deeply honored and privileged tonight to have with us a hero, a legend in our own time. Looking around the room, I can guess that some of you would remember the story, and some of you were even somehow a part of it. And it's my privilege and pleasure to call upon a dear friend, Mr. Beryl Wasjsman, who needs no introduction. Montreal's Beryl Wasjsman, to formally introduce our esteemed guest speaker tonight. And you will presently hear why I've called upon Beryl to have that honor.
Good evening. The rabbi used the word hero. We hear it bandied about. I want to paint a small picture for you. I was born in the Soviet Union. I wore this man's name on my wrist. I'll explain why in 30 seconds. But I want to paint a picture. You left your apartment, and there was a lady at the end of the hall taking down the time that you left. Somebody came to see you, recorded in the book. Half a block down the street, guards with guns, big brown coats, every half block. We talk about Big Brother today, and there's all this concern about Facebook and privacy. This was the Soviet Union. You had no privacy. You didn't exist. And everything you did, somebody was looking. In 1970, Yosef Mendelevich and 14 others, led by Mark Dimshitz, who was the only one who knew how to fly a plane, and Edward Kuznetsov, decided they had enough. What does it mean to have enough? What does it mean to be a hero in those circumstances? People would say, oh, it's ridiculous, it's suicidal, but, you know, next year is the 50th year since Bobby Kennedy gave the Tiny Ripple of Hope speech. And Kennedy gave it in Soweto Township in South Africa to people totally without hope, totally under another tyranny. And he said, you don't need an army. He repeated words that came right from our Torah. You don't need an army. Each individual bears witness. And then he said, every person from 1,000 centers of energy and daring, standing up for an ideal, making an action, will in the end create such a torrent, such a wave that it will tear down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. That's what Yosef Mendelevich and his colleagues did in 1970 in Operation Wedding. Can you imagine in those times people sitting around saying, we've had enough, we're going? Chartering a plane, reserving seats at plane that they were going to hijack. And of the 15, only Mark Dimshitz knew how to fly a plane. And of course, they were all arrested before they could get out. But these actions, these centers of energy and daring, listen to what it accomplished. The sentences were horrible. But listen to what happened. Not 11 years later when Yosef Mendelevich got out of jail. Not 9 years later when Kuznetsov got out of jail. Within 24 months of the last sentence in the last Lenin-grad trial, in the 9 years before 1970, 3,700 Soviet Jews were allowed to immigrate to Israel. In the 9 years after the Lenin-grad trials, before détente, 341,000 Soviet Jews were allowed to immigrate to Israel. That number is directly the result of the heroism of Joseph Mendelevich and his colleagues. It created such an international stir. Not a stirring of governments. Not a stirring of armies. Because we don't matter, right? Who wants to save the Jews? It was too much to risk a plane to bomb the rail lines to Auschwitz, but the oil fields in Romania they could bomb in World War II. But of people, Amcha, what started out as a movement here in Montreal, and people don't know this, it was called the Committee of 35, women And some of their names come back to me. Miriam Garvis, Barbara Stern, who just celebrated her 85th birthday, Wendy Litvak. And pretty soon, there was committees of 35 everywhere. New York, London, but what people don't know is it was all directed from here. And when Martin Penn, who was my dear friend, when he went to the Canadian Jewish Congress, he was put in charge of that program. And every signal and every order that was sent out from Montreal. It is so appropriate that Josef Mendelevich is here in this city, but appropriate for another personal reason. Nobody knew what the first step should be. Okay, we have a committee, we're writing articles, opinion, but they wanted to reach out to the other Soviet Jews. So they started calling, except they had nobody to speak Russian. So I was 15 and I was the designated caller. But we had to make money for this committee. There was no funding. So there were a couple of jewelers in Montreal who agreed to make us silver bracelets. They were very soft, sterling silver bracelets. And on each bracelet on this side was written the name of a prisoner. And then it said, prisoner of conscience. Then it said, let my people go. And on the side was a Star of David in a chain with the hammer and sickle on it. For 11 years, my first bracelet said Josef Mendelevich. These were incredible times. Within 18 months of within 24 months of these sentences being handed down, we lived in a time when the United States again and the business community wanted to do business with cheap slave labor. And they wanted to send factories and jobs to Russia. When millions of Jews were being harassed and imprisoned for their ideas, and two very brave men, Senator Henry Jackson, a Democrat from Washington, friend of John Kennedy's, and Republican Congressman Charles Vanek, stood up in Congress and said no, and passed the Jackson-Vanek Amendment that specifically demanded of the Soviet Union with this phrase, when you meet the standard of the free movement of peoples and ideas, and specifically allow Jews to go to Israel, then we will consider that you have met the standards for most favored nation trading status. Not before, and not a single factory was allowed to move American jobs to the Soviet Union. Many people talk about what led to the fall of the Soviet Union. Reagan's Star War Initiative. They were being starved for money. I promise you, my friends, the first shot like Bunker Hill was fired in 1970 by Josef Mendelevich and his colleagues. They created a revolution. And you should be privileged to listen to him tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Beryl, and everybody that took part in the struggle. And we are colleagues. We fought together, and it worked. So remember that when we Jews are together, it works. And even the big power of Soviet Union at that time was specifically strong, stepped back and opened the gates. We won the battle. We are the winners. Now I will tell you a couple of stories of my personal life, and certainly I had to explain how a regular Soviet student, a member of communist movement, became a member of this hijacking plot, and especially in underground Jewish activities. I have a limited time, only 1 hour, so next time maybe I will tell more. Really it is interesting, the development, and it is not only on my story, it is a story of a lot of Jewish young people that time in the 60s, in the 70s, including Sharansky and Edelstein. They developed from their communist ideology to be real Jews. It's a miracle itself. Just think, it's a miracle. The Soviets and the KGB would report to the Politburo that everything is done. that the Jews are already assimilate, they are already became communists, whatever, and then after our trial, the head of KGB, Andropov, had to admit that they had a false information. The Jews are still remain Yiddish, Jewish, It's not a miracle, certainly. We know it's not a miracle that a Yid bleibt a Yid. A Jew remains a Jew. But for them it was a miracle. How all the time of the 70 years of oppression, they couldn't do it. It's our miracle. It's our, it was our success. Anyway, to tell in short lines my story, okay, I was born after the Second World War in Latvia, not specifically Russia, but that time, it was occupied by the Soviet army, so for a long time I became a Russian Jew, and also even having kind of Jewish background, for Latvia before the war was like a democratic country, and my parents got kind of Jewish education. They believed that communism and socialism will solve all the problems and stop being religious. So I was grown up as a regular Russian citizen, going in a public school for one reason, that there was no other schools at all, no yeshivas, nothing. It was like a desert. And then, step by step, it happened in my personal life, a kind of strategy. When I was a child of 9, 10, my father was arrested as a false accusation. For that time, in the 50s, in the 60s, still Russia was very poor, and always they looked for somebody to blame their big bad doing on somebody. Certainly, they were us, Jewish people, but we did well, so my father was arrested. It was a tragedy in my family. My mother, that trusted in communism, all of a sudden discovered that it's false, There's no justice, no equality. She got sad, and ill, and passed away. So when you can if you could look at our family that time, you couldn't expect that something will come out for that. The father is in a prison, the mother in a hospital, passed away. And see, it's not true. I am alive, my sisters, my children, my grandchildren. Am Yisrael Chai. It's a miracle. So it's another story, a long story that I will not tell you today, how, and certainly under influence of whatever the tragedies that happened with my family, I became a member of underground Jewish movement, and step by step developed and come to a conclusion that it's not enough to teach Jewish history, to teach and study Hebrew. I understood that if I am willing to go to Israel, it means I would like to go back to my roots, to become like Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which meant to become religious. So I became religious by a solution, a logical development. If you're doing something to be Jewish, to a real accomplished Jew means to be a religious Jew. So even before my arrest, I became already about tshuva. I believe it was the end of the 60s, maybe the only one or some group of my peers that followed the pathway. And another miracle happened. We had, in the end of the 60s, small groups in different cities called ulpanim, that we taught. I was a Hebrew teacher, so I had my ulpan. I taught Hebrew, Jewish history. And later on, it turned out that we have, not only in Riga, not only in Petersburg, Lenin-grad at the time, in Moscow, Odessa, whatever, all over Soviet Russia. There were groups like that. So we established an underground Jewish movement to save our nation, to save them from mixed marriages, assimilation. And later on, it came up to the decision to break through the Iron Curtain and try to publicize our case. Elie Wiesel, Zichrono Livracha, in his book, Jews in Silence, mentioned that we are silent. So it was a time to voice and tell, even in Soviet Russia, Am Yisrael Chai, and we need your help. It is how we come up to the idea of hijacking this airplane for, the plan was not only to hijack it, simply to go to Sweden, and then in Sweden, the closest place from Leningrad, St. Petersburg, to a Western country was Sweden, like some maybe half an hour of flight, and then have a press conference and tell the whole story and call up a whole jury to help our efforts to let our people go. So now I will describe the small, short story of our arrest, and I will continue more details. It happened that I met here relatives of Asher Blank from Leningrad at that time, before our arrest, was already in Israel, and he passed to the groups that planned to hijack this airplane like an order from Golda Meir that the Israeli government is altogether the operation, obviously, you know, and we have to stop it. So people in Leningrad, the bigger group, stopped all preparation for hijacking, and then our commander, Major Dimshitz, called us in Riga. We thought, you know, we honor Israel government, but they are not going to decide, you know, what to do. We know better, and we felt we have to continue. So somehow we, you know, wouldn't obey to the government. It's normal. And we decided to continue. Later on, Dimshitz called us up and told them that he found like a flight exactly, he would tell, tailored exactly for us. Why? For there was a small airplane with some 12 passengers on the board. We figured to buy all the tickets for our fighting organization, and it had to go to a certain place called Priazorsk, like 50 miles from Finnish border. But, you know, in any way we couldn't cross a Finnish border. Certainly it was heavily guarded. Simply, he figured that this small airplane would land in a forest. It was like a space just to land, to let tourists go out, and then it will turn back. So instead, you know, normally, I don't know what concept of hijacking do you have, but mostly it's people that fight with pilots in the air, which is dangerous. So we felt the best way is to let them land. At the moment, there were two pilots. One pilot would come and open the door. So we would suggest him politely, you know, to leave and stay on the ground for a while, for we have to go to Sweden. And we would promise him to pay gas and all, whatever happened. Anyway, we never had aim to harm him. We were 12 of us, young, strong boys, and they two old pilots. We could do it easily. And then we had to go over the border. Dimshitz told that this type of airplane permits to fly over the trees. So the radars cannot detect it. It was very smooth and very simply. By the way, it happened many, many years ago on June 15. So each time I celebrate, it's like, you know, it's a big day in my personal history, a big development, as it was mentioned for Am Yisrael. So imagine we came a day before, on June 14, from Riga to Leningrad, and stayed in a forest close to these small airplanes that we had board later on next day. And you can see the scenery, young people sitting, they had a fire and had some sausages on the fire. I wouldn't eat, for I was religious. It was certainly not kosher. But then, you know, Mr. Dimshitz came from Leningrad. He was a resident of Leningrad to instruct us what to do exactly. He divided us in two groups. One is the fighting group to take over the pilots, and the second just to support. I was, you know, I don't look too strong, so I was certainly in the second group. And from outside, if you watch us, it's like a very romantic. Young people sit and joke and whatever. All of a sudden, two black cars drove up to our direction. We were in the forest. Black cars with a so-called Volga company produced in Russia was an obvious sign that it is KGB. with numbers 00 something. So we understood they are going to arrest us. We were tensed. Some plainclothes people walk out from the cars, come to our direction. What will happen? Nothing happened. All of a sudden, they turn back and drove away. But still, we had to decide what we shall do. For some people thought they know about whatever we are going to do. Let's run away. And I told, how can we run away, you know? If they really know about our preparation, they will certainly arrest us. But then they will arrest us on our way of escape. It will be our loss. I told, friends, we decided to go whatever we can for our nation. Let's go up to the end. Let them arrest us or kill us, or maybe it will, just not true. We shall succeed and go over and do whatever we plan to do. So some friends hesitated, but Mr. Dimshit supported my approach, and the same Edward Kuznetsov. So people had no way to do it. We decided we are going up to the end. It's all in my book. You can read it later on in more details. And then in the morning, we went to the airport. I can't describe you how excited I was. You know, I read a lot of Jewish history, people that do something for his nation. And now it is me, you know. It is me. Maybe I will do something for Am Yisrael. You know, this moment, I didn't feel that I belong to myself. I was not Yosef Mendelevich. I am part of my nation. And so, being excited and glad, we heard an announcement, boarding. People start going by foot, for it was a small airport, so we saw our airplane standing far away. People start going. I looked to my friends. I was the last in the back of the group. I enjoyed looking young, strong Jews going to fight for the freedom of Am Yisrael. What a privilege. And all of a sudden, something happened. They start looking around, looked at me, and I thought for a while, what's the reason that they are looking at me? The problem was that I had a black beret on my head to cover my head. Before leaving the foreigners, they told, remove your beret. You know, it's looks strange, you know. People on summer in Russia don't wear berets. And then they told it is a woman beret. What I am not to be blamed that it's what they sold. Anyway, later on I understood it's not a problem of my black beret, something else. I looked around myself, and then I understood what's happening. Mr. Dimshitz was missing. So now we connected whatever to what happened the past night. Maybe he's arrested, or maybe he is escaped. Doesn't matter the reason, but in fact we have nothing to do on the board. You know, without the pilot, nothing will happen. And you know, we have there are moments that you have to decide yourself. There is no time to consult anybody. And I decided. I watched Mr. Dimshitz before that coming to the airport with his wife and 2 daughters. So I felt maybe he stayed outside the building of the airport, a small building, and it's how he wouldn't listen to the announcement. So I start running back. You know, imagine, you know, they are missing Dimshitz, and now Mendelevich is running back. Too bad. Anyway, I come there, and I saw Mr. Dimshitz seated really next to the building of the airport with his family. He has a guitar. You know, they had sandwiches. It was early in the morning. I got angry. I told, what, you know, you are eating sandwiches. We are going to bring freedom to our nation. You are eating sandwiches. So Mr. Dimshitz told, what, they start boarding? I don't like it, he would say. You know, he checked his watch and he told, you know, the boarding has to start like 9 o'clock in the morning, and now it is only 8:15. It's strange, you know, something is bad. I don't forget about it. You know, you are used to Russian army. Everything is strict. It's not an army, you know. Go. So he hesitated for a while, and then he told me, okay, I will gather the belongings, run to the friends, and tell them that I am coming. So you cannot imagine, if I described you that I was excited before that, I was twice excited as that. Yeah, just felt that I am flowing in the air. So the moment I come to the spot that I left my friends, I was thrown on the ground, beaten, my hands handcuffed, and lying with my nose to the baton of the airport. I thought to myself, it's exactly what we expected. It happened, But we are alive, It's good, we are alive. I was lifted. My glasses fall down, but I still could see my friends that came up to the airplane. And later on, they told me that the moment they come close to the airplane, Russian paratroopers jumped out from the airplane. Some more come from around, and certainly all of them were arrested. Too bad. So I looked at it, and all of a sudden I heard like boom, like shootings. I turned around, and I saw Mr. Dimshitz being escorted and bleeding. All his face was full with blood. Nothing special, but that time it looked very terrible, And imagine his wife crying and two small daughters altogether lost. For the father told that they are going to collect berries in the forest, What berries, The father is wounded, the friends are arrested, something terrible. That time I understood that it's tragedy, a real tragedy. But again, there was no time to think about anything. Each of us was taken in a specific room in the building of this airport, and I understood really that it was tailored for us, for the building was full with KGB officers. It was a trap. I was pushed to a specific room, an office, and produced a piece of paper, the order of my arrest, by the district prosecutor, saying that according to the information of secret services of Soviet Union, of KGB, and there is on the territory of Smolny Airport is acting a Jewish terrorist organization trying to harm state security, betray the Russian motherland, and run away to an imperialistic country. So the prosecutor would order to arrest us, to question us, and to warn that if it is true, we expect death penalty. Too bad, when I read the bottom line, I felt it's not that good, You would say, but you were a hero, you told that you are ready to die. Yes, I was ready to die, for I figured that they can hit our airplane with a rocket, and we shall die. It is easy death. Or maybe during the shootings, for we had the weapon as well, on the spot, they can shoot me. That's all. But now I had to go over all the interrogations, what kind of, I was not aware. And then if they pass a death verdict, I have to sit and wait until they take me to execute me. You need to be a really hero. I am not a hero. I can do it, But there was nobody to tell that I'm not a hero. I had to be a hero. Anyway, certainly I refused to cooperate, refused to sign anything. And they told me, okay, we saw heroes like you. We shall bring you to a KGB prison. You will talk. So on the way from the airport to KGB prison, on the board of one of the cars that came in the evening, a Volga, black Volga, I looked through the window. Leningrad, that time Petersburg, is a beautiful city with some 6 or more million residents. It was a summer day, beautiful day. I remember students going to the universities, children to the schools, whatever. It was life. And I lost my life. So I asked myself, what you are saying now? Maybe it was a mistake. I hesitated for a while and I told, no, I am glad and privileged. I know that if it's something valuable to you, you have to give up something. And sometimes, if it is really important to you, Am Israel, you have to sacrifice your life. So I felt privileged that I was ready to sacrifice my life. Again, on the way to the prison, it was good. But the moment you are being pushed in a small cell, all alone, nobody is coming up it's different, Day after day, nobody is crying why they wouldn't come, for there are some people that were ready to cooperate, The moment we were arrested, we were like a group, but each of us is a human being. Some of us softer, some are stronger, so they get all the necessary information. More than that, they watched us and followed us for half a year. So in fact, they didn't need anything, So finally, I got to understand that my friends are giving up, giving names, and more people were arrested. Imagine that then when they found that we had an underground national organization, they arrested the leaders of the organization. It was terrible, and I blamed myself being there in the prison. I tried to bring good for my nation, and in fact, it was a disaster, You can imagine the feeling. I was not afraid whatever would happen with me, but the feeling of me being guilty in that other people were arrested. I remembered when I was a child how my father was arrested, and now other children are being, their father being taken off. It was a terrible time. But after like a month, one day I came up in my cell, and I felt good. I asked myself, why? What did it change? What's the difference? Yesterday I was in very bad moods. Now I feel good. And like God sent me an idea saying, Yosef, you try to do something good, you have to believe that finally it will be good. That's simple. Now, later on I discovered that it's a Hasidic saying, sing good and everything will be good. So anyway, I wouldn't cooperate. They tried to torture me. They sent me to a mental institution saying, what, you are not cooperating? You are not afraid of us? But everybody in KGB prison has to be afraid. You are not afraid. It means that you have mental problems. For every normal person is afraid. If you are not afraid, you're abnormal. Send me in a mental institution, and the moment I was brought to the mental institution, I was approached with so-called doctor, with a KGB officer with a white cloak on his shoulders, and he told me, if you cooperate, we shall send you back to the prison, and you will be with your friends. If not, we will decide that you are mentally ill, and we shall treat you medically. And you can imagine what will happen with you. It was terrible to stay there for a month, knowing that I am going toward the end. But Baruch Hashem, thank God, everything finished. A lot of stories how it came about. I was sent back, and then they changed their strategy. I understood that they are the trap that they put us for the reason to have like a trial, a performance. Stalin time, the prisoners would declare, that they are guilty. Not only that, they would blame, they expect us to blame American Jewry in Israel, infecting us with the ideas of hijinking or whatever, and then come up on Russian Jewry, stop any involvement, sit back, got assimilated. It was their scheme. It was their aim. And it worked, As I mentioned, some people broke up, give up, start cooperating. Too bad. And I could the approach, and as you know, there is an approach of a stick and a carrot. I don't like carrots, but they didn't have anything else. So imagine how it was their carrot approach. Next time, after being back from the mental institution, I was escorted to another Russian KGB officer, Captain Popov. He looked at me, and he told me, Yosef, you're young. I feel sorry that you were arrested. He felt sorry that I am arrested, And he told me, you look like my young brother, And I understand, you're a young man. You have all kinds of ideas, romantics, and aspiration. I can understand you. He can understand me. It's their carrot approach. And then he told me, but now you have to be realistic. You are in our hands, You can't break the wall with your head. You will get death penalty. Think again. Doesn't pay you, And then he told me he made his major mistake looking at me, and he told me, now I look at you, you don't look Jewish at all, you know. He said, this man doesn't look Jewish, but without a beard and a face, really, you know, like everybody here. Like, who knows, you are Jewish or not. And then he told me, your Russian language is better than mine, you know. And then he told me, you know, you studied a lot of Russian literature, like Pushkin and Lermontov and Tolstoy. You're a Russian boy, you know. Stop it, you know. Stop telling that you are Jewish. We shall accept you, you know. You know, admit guilty, and instead you will get not death penalty, like some 7 to 8 years of imprisonment. Out from the prison, you will start your life as a regular Soviet citizen that I hated most, you know. What a perspective to become a regular Soviet citizen. But anyway, you know, I hesitated. So, you know, to admit that, you know, somebody finally speaking you like with a human being, not yelling, not intimidating, he understands you. Also, somehow, I did understand that it's a game, but sometimes you are ready to, you know, to believe something. You need something. You need somebody that would understand you. So he felt that I am hesitating. Take him back to his, it is a museum of KGB in Latvia, in independent Latvia. So I went recently to visit my cell, the same, you know. It was in a basement room, a small cell, and I imagined there how I would go around and saying to myself, maybe he's right, you know. Maybe it's a time, you know, to be realistic, to save my life. Later on, you know, I will come back and explain everything. And then I recollected whatever he told me, that I am not Jewish. I got angry. How he dare to say that I am not Jewish? I am Jewish. It's the meaning of my life. It's the sense of my life that I discovered that I am not a Soviet citizen. I am a Jew. I am a proud Jew. And he's taking my pride away. Like I told, what he promised me to be like a Soviet citizen, like a dog. I am now a human being. I have real dreams. I am part of my nation. In no way I will give up it. So, and then I looked to myself and I told, really, how am I Jewish, you know? I look like them, speak their language, and it's not enough to declare that I am Jewish. How to make them believe that I am Jewish. And then, not less important, how to keep myself strong and not to give up. For each moment, you know, you hesitate, you can give up, maybe still. I have to create, I told, something like build a wall between them and myself, to make them understand that also I look like them and speak their language, I am altogether different. And it was obvious to me that if I became a believer Jew, or I conduct as a believer Jew, they will understand that I don't belong altogether. So it was my scheme, to behave in a cell like a believer Jew. So, you know, think how would you behave in a cell without anything to make them believe that you are a believer Jew, that you are a real Jew. You know, you need maybe tefillin or tzitzis, but nobody would produce me something like that. So I decided I have to invent something special, you know, to make me strong. Again, I had two goals, two tasks, to make them understand that I am different and to keep me strong and not to give up. So I recollected that I had a black beret, as I mentioned, but the moment I was thrown on the ground, I lost my beret, and it was the time to think about my head, not of my black beret. But now it was my struggle, so what I can produce instead of this black beret, I saw, you know, we all use in Russia, I don't know how in America, we have handkerchiefs. Like, you know, people say it's not good, you know, it's not like a lot of bacteria. But sometimes it's helpful. So I made knots on my handkerchief, like this, and put on my head. I will do two. I made 4. It's enough, 2. So I put on my head. And when I was escorted next time to my Russian brother Popov, he looked at me and he told, Yosef, you are completely crazy, he told. Not by chance they send you to a mental institution, you know. Why should you put this piece of cloth on your head? You know, you are an educated man. Behave. And then I told, yeah, I am an educated man, but I have my Jewish education. You guys, when you enter a room, you remove your hats. and with the opposite. And then I produced him a whole lecture about Judaism, whatever I studied in the underground, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, etc., etc. He wrote down, it was a whole protocol. The first time I signed the protocol. It was a mistake, never sign anything without a lawyer. But that time I felt it's true, so I signed the protocol. And then he told me, you think you are clever, you are smart, you are stupid. For with this behavior, you are digging your own grave. Take him back, think again. It doesn't pay you. So when I was back to my cell, I felt I am doing the right thing. Imagine what a miracle happened to me. In fact, being there in the cell, I had two options: to cooperate or not to cooperate. There was no other option. Yes, there was another option: to behave Jewish. It is altogether illogical. And I believe that the God sent me a message over the big building, through the big building of the KGB. Yosef, your way to save yourself and you and Neshama, your soul, be Jewish. So now I like building my wall between me and him. What else can I do like a believer Jew to make them feel that I am different? Stop pressing me. And the decision was very easy. If, say, a man, God forbid, is in a hospital, what he's doing there? He's praying, right? Help God. Some people discover that there is God only being in a hospital. They could do it before, but at least it's the time to discover the God. And certainly in a prison. So I decided I will pray. I didn't remember, I would go from time to time to the synagogue, and I was a Hebrew teacher, so I saw the prayer book, but I wouldn't remember exactly what is written there. So I made my prayer, my tefillah, saying, please, God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, release my nation out from Russian slavery and take care of my father, my two sisters, and don't forget me anymore here in Israel. I cannot withstand anymore. Too hard. Now I had another problem, when here is Mizrach, like it's the direction of Jerusalem. So I would like being in a cell to decide where is Jerusalem. I couldn't do it, for it has a small window with a lot of grates on it. You can hardly tell day from night, not Mizrach from Ma'ariv, not east from west. Then I had a solution. I remembered that in our underground movement, we had a book called the Book of Daniel, telling a story about Daniel, a tzaddik that was in Persia like some 2,400 years before, and he had the problem like mine. He would like to find out what the direction of Jerusalem, and he could not. So he would come up to the window, open the window, and direct his heart to Jerusalem. So it is what I did. I couldn't open the window, but at least I could stand in it. And you imagine the window up there. I stood in it, and I prayed, and I cried, whatever. After several days after this practice, guards entered rushing inside the room, grabbed me on the wall, and told, we watch you all the time. You stand at the wall, like touching the bricks of the wall, like you're praying like this. What's the reason you try to take out a brick to run away? Like there is Monte Cristo story, like the man managed to run away, and now everything was, they checked the bricks, they checked the grates, everything was intact. So what's the reason you're standing all the time at the wall and looking in the window? They checked my pockets, and I found my tefillah, my prayer. We understand. They told, it's a secret letters you try to pass over to your friends. You should be really crazy, to think that you throw a locked window, you can pass anything. Anyways, I had no explanation, so they took my letter and took it to translation. And it's how they found out that it is not a letter at all. So when I was escorted to my Russian brother, Popov, he was very angry. I saw on the top of the table my letter, the prayer, and the translation, and he told me, Yosef, you became religious, You never been religious. Who influenced you? Imagine, he understands that the supervisors can't influence me to become a religious Jew. So who influenced me? The God. The evidence. It's the evidence, obvious evidence that there is a God. Being a young boy, they looked at me, I'm their slave. And under their influence, all of a sudden, I started behaving differently. covering my head, trying to pray, etc. So finally, they lost the battle. And when we were escorted to our trial, too bad, I understood, as I told you, that friends cooperate, it will be a failure. But a friend of mine, entering the room of the court, managed to whisper me, Yosef, he told me, today is a Hanukkah holiday. And Hanukkah means miracles. So I thought, certainly, miracles will happen. And they happened. The first big question was Major Dimshit, certainly. His wife was arrested, his two small daughters, and he certainly expected death penalty. So they believed he will be the main performer. And they told him, Dimshit, you served in the Russian army, you were a major in Russian air forces, and you were a member of a communist party, and then you studied at university. You got everything from your motherland. How at all you come to betray your Russian motherland? And from outside you're looking at it, the real scoundrel. The man got everything and did whatever he did. So Mr. Dimshit stood up and he told, I accuse the Soviet government in anti-Semitism. You suppress us, you closed our educational institution, and you don't permit us to work on certain jobs, and the very reason that you support the Arabs against Israel is you explain it for all kind of political reasoning. Not true. The only reason is you hate everything Jewish. Finally, we have our Jewish country, you hate it as well. It was a long speech, I couldn't record it, certainly at that time, but if I could, I believe it should be learned in the high schools, A man that expects death penalty and speaks out strongly. And then there was Silva Zalmanson. His husband, Edward Kuznetsov, had expected death penalty as well. For he served before that 6 years in the prison for political activities. And when you are arrested twice for the same reason, you are especially dangerous, you expect death penalty. So she cried all the time. And they felt she is broken. So they called Silva. You got a university education, you worked as an engineer in our enterprise, you got everything, all the story, all the old story. Why would you betray your Russian motherland? So she told, for every Jew is swearing that, as I will tell you in Hebrew and translate, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. If I forget you, Jerusalem, let me forget my arm. Like a swear that we will be trustful to Yerushalayim forever. So the judge asked for translator to translate. Silva told, no need, I will translate you myself. And when she translated, I felt that the judge is going to collapse. For he was promised that the performance is set, everything is good, and it now is, nothing is coming through. What will happen? And what not less important, that after the two courageous men and women said the mode of behavior, all other friends behaved the same. And being asked what the reason why they would run away from Soviet Russia, they explained clearly it was, and I looked at them and I told, we figured to have a press conference in Sweden, now we have it right away there in the court. It was a press conference. And I was the last one to be asked, for they understood they can't expect anything. But according to the procedure, everybody had to be questioned. So Mendelevich, you studied in our university, etc., etc. Why would you betray your Russian motherland? So I told, Russia is not my motherland, I told, the God of Israel gave Eretz Yisrael to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's my place, And I hope that I will never betray my motherland. Sit down, scoundrel. And then the prosecutor told to the judge, in vain would you ask Mendelevich the question, don't you know the man is that, small in his outlooks. We cannot understand. The man studied physics and thermodynamics in university, is not interested in anything except of his nation and his Torah, And it was like telling the judge, give him penalty, heavy penalty, but for me it was like admitting that I won. Only half a year, they looked at me, I'm their hands. They can do whatever they can do with me. I'm their slave. And all of a sudden, it turned out that I am not a slave at all. I am a free man, for I am doing what I enjoy to do. I enjoy being Jewish. It is how I am a free man. So they passed the death penalty for Mr. Dimshitz and Mr. Kuznetsov. Too terrible. They were already dressed in special dresses of people that should be shot. I got only 15 years of imprisonment for betraying my Russian motherland, and 15 years of imprisonment trying to harm state security, and 7 years of imprisonment for my Jewish activities. But life sentence, it's life. Death sentence, it's death. Anyway, so we were pushed back, and it was the beginning of Hanukkah. In the end of the Hanukkah, in 8th day of the Hanukkah, a friend of mine, the same that managed to whisper me that it is Hanukkah, knocked at the wall. He sat next to me in the cell. So, and we did know that there is a way of communication. When somebody is knocking at the wall, you take a mug and listen in the same spot, and he's speaking. Believe me, it is much more smoother. Sometimes on smartphone we can listen. Very smooth, and he told me, Yosef, I had a meeting with my brother, and he told that under heavy vote public opinion, the Russians give up. They canceled death penalties and softened all other penalties. So Dimshitz and Kuznetsov got 15 years of imprisonment. You got only 12 years of imprisonment. Silva got only 8 years of imprisonment. It was our victory. Unbelievable. We won the battle. And Gulag, on the way, I got to know that, as it was mentioned, the Aliyah started. And I was told later by my father that the head of Communist Party, the Politburo, come together and they admitted that they are wrong. That still 10% of Jews are infected by the nationalist ideas, and they should be let out, not to infect all others. But if later on they discover that everybody is infected. For the beginning, it was only 10%. So, being in a prison, in a concentration compulsory labor camp, knowing that me being in prison brings freedom to other people, it was the biggest joy of my life. There is a concept of pidyon shvuim that you have to save some prisoner being enslaved. I was the man being myself a prisoner, but I brought freedom to thousands and thousands of people. So nothing was especially hard for me. Everything was smooth, knowing that I have a task, which is very important to have an aim and task and achieve it. Now I will tell you some stories about being in a prison, in a concentration labor camp. There are two types of Russian prison. The regular one is like a concentration camp, barracks, or military camp. Barracks, and there is from another side there's an enterprise. In the morning there's a roll call and send you in the morning to work in the enterprise. In the evening you come back, sleep, and etc. and etc. It comes again and again. So I asked myself how I would be able to behave Jewish among the hundreds of non-Jewish prisoners. And another miracle happened in my life. The very day that I was brought to this specific camp, I was approached with a young boy that wouldn't look Jewish, but he told me, Chaver ma shlomcha. So I understood he knows Hebrew, is Jewish. And really it was a Jewish boy that was involved in underground activities to make communism with human face. Jews always take care about other nations to make communism more popular. And he and the whole Jewish group were arrested. The head of the group, Rabbi Aryeh Wudka, nowadays in Carmel, in Maalot, got 7 years of imprisonment. He himself, Shimon, nowadays a Russian rabbi, Shimon Grillos, got 5 years of imprisonment. And before being sent to serve their time out from the court, Aryeh Wudka told, now stop all kind of involvement in whatever will happen with the Russian nation. Let us become Orthodox Jews. Very, very clever. And then Shimon told me, but the problem is I don't know what does it mean to be an Orthodox Jew. You know, for his parents like mine were communists. He was from Vilna, from Lita. So, and then he told me when I heard that Jewish hijackers have been arrested in the airport, I figured that some of you can educate me. And I prayed that the God would send somebody of you to educate me. You are knowledgeable in Jewish tradition? Yes, I do. You know some Hebrew, some history? Okay, so teach me. You know, I told Shimon, see, it's late at night, and as far as I know, we have to go in the morning to work. Let's go to sleep. When in enterprise we shall find time, I will educate you. He got angry. You know, there are Litvaks, him from Lita. You have to teach me on the spot. You know, you can't imagine, he would say, how I hate myself being not a Jew for all the years I'm here. Teach me on the spot. So, you know, my knowledge was very limited. I could do it for 5 minutes. I told Shimon, we have keep Shabbat, Sabbath, not to work on Sabbath, get some food that we are permitted to eat, and then we have to get a Bible, Chumash, and a Siddur, a prayer book, and we have to cover our heads. He told, anything is possible. If you refuse to work on Shabbat, they'll put you in a punishment room, you will die there. If you refuse eat their food, there is no other food. You will die without food. And then he told me, what you mentioned, a prayer book, a Torah, when the last time the Russian would publish books like that, and you are not permitted to have anything except whatever was published in Soviet Russia. So too bad, you know. We ought to do something. Nothing is possible. And then he told me, you know what? I have an idea. You mentioned a yarmulke. I have long pants. He's a short guy, you know. And so he had the long pants. Let's cut pieces of my pants. And I have a thread and a needle. And we shall produce yarmulkes. So it's how we started being Jewish. Later on, Shimon told me, you know, some herbs in a yard is eatable. Imagine what? Normally, the concentration camps are in forest for 2 reasons. One reason is that nobody has to know what's in Russian forest. Nobody knows that inside this concentration camp. And then, if somebody is trying to dig a tunnel to run away, you know, it's wet there, and you cannot dig too deep. So I never tried to escape, but being in the forest, it was a benefit for a lot of grass, a herb, would growing in the yard. So we could find out what's eatable, what is not eatable. I even took some herbs to show you. I found in a rabbi's yard something. Let me check maybe. I had a green garden to take care on my green garden in the back of the barrack. Imagine in the morning, you know, once they were working around the clock, so sometimes I would be free in the morning. Summer, even in Siberia, sometimes it's summer, so the sun is shining. I am sitting and taking care on my green garden, and I would say to myself, see, only a year before I expected death penalty, and now I am alive, you know, what a miracle. So all of a sudden, one of the days, I heard somebody yelling at me, you prisoner, what you doing there? So I got afraid if they will find my green garden, they will spoil it, you know, for they were not interested in us eating protein and vitamins. So I came up. It was a group of Russian officers coming from Moscow. You can imagine strong Russian officers with everything blinking in the new uniform, and there's a Jew is standing there like that. I expected them asking me, why are you eating the grass? You are an animal, you know. You made me eat. It is whatever I had. But instead, he pointed to at my yarmulke, and he told me, what's on your head? So I explained it like I would explain to Captain Popov previously, that is Jewish tradition. Everybody is covering the head. You know, I was aware that not everybody is doing that, but when you make a statement, it should be 100%. Every Jew is covering his head. And Satara told the whole story. He listened patiently, and he told me, okay, I understand you are religious. You can be religious, a liberal, he permitted me be religious, but inside of you. The moment you put the yarmulke on your head, it's like a political manifestation. You try to influence other prisoners. It's illegal. And then he told me, I have a list of belongings that you are permitted to have as a prisoner. There is nothing like that. So remove it, or otherwise I will punish you. Certainly I refused. The soldiers came, threw me on the ground, beat me, took forcibly my yarmulke, and that with Shimon. But Shimon had more pants, so we cut more pieces of it. And it started like that. It's a long story. I think I have to finish. But it was a struggle that we won in the struggle. Finally, after all of it in the book, finally, in the end, I was punished for refusing to work on Shabbat with 3 years of imprisonment on specially hard condition. Out from this special prison, back to my concentration camp, I found that all my friends are being released. As it was mentioned, for some reason, all, including Dimshitz and Kuznetsov and Silva, were released after 9 years, and I stayed more, 2 years more. There are some reasons for that. Anyway, but there were other Jews that I started teaching them and explaining whatever, so they made a search in my belongings, and they found that I have illegally smuggled inside a prayer book and a Torah book or whatever. You know how simply paid officers, can be bribed. You give some money, and they bring things. So we got it finally, and they confiscated it. So I felt too bad, they are taking my sacred books, and I cannot protest. What can I do? So I decided I will declare a prolonged hunger strike. And I managed to pass over the knowledge. That time we were very friendly with Ukrainian prisoners. So Ukrainian prisoners that fought for their independence. So I met a certain Ukrainian prisoner that had to be released, and I told him that please pass over the knowledge of my hunger strike to Seruvniks or refuseniks in Moscow. They should pass it over to Human Rights Committee in UN. I hope that it will help. So it took time. I declared my prolonged hunger strike, and after like 2 months of hunger strike, 56 days, all of a sudden the head of the prison, Major Zhuravkov, entered my punishment room for hungering is violating the rules. I was in punishment room. And he told me, what you continue to fight against our Soviet government? I understood that it got them, So I told, no, I don't have anything against the Soviet regime, Just give me back my books and I will stop the hunger strike. Later on, I was told that the moment when the knowledge of my hunger strike reached Human Rights Commission in UN, and then it was a time that the Soviets blamed Israel for violating the human rights of Palestinians. So the American representative stood up and told, what you have right, you Russians have right to speak about human rights, There is a Jewish boy that going to die because you confiscated his Bible. You call it human rights. So the Russian diplomat certainly called the Kremlin, and they told, yeah, we have a Mishuga, somebody crazy there. So give him back whatever he needs, for otherwise we can't anymore criticize Israel. So it is one case maybe in the history that the Arabs helped the Jew to get back at Torah. So I stopped my hunger strike, and in a short time after that, I was flown out from Moscow, from my prison camp, directly to Moscow, and there I was announced that I don't deserve to be anymore considered a Soviet citizen. I don't fit their criteria. It took only 11 years for them to understand that I'm not exactly a Soviet citizen. And see, it's on my book. It's me coming to Lud Airport. You see, they bought me in KGB a black suit. Pierre Cardin, I used later for 10 years for Shabbos. Yeah, sure. And then before being put on the board of the airplane that had to take me out from Soviet Russia, I talked to colonels that escorted me, and I told, see, Colonel, you arrested us 11 years ago to prevent us to leave Soviet Russia. Now you bought me a ticket just to get rid. I told, you have to release everybody unless your empire will got broken. And it happened later on. Now on the way to Vienna, when I stopped in Vienna, that time it was 81, no direct flights from Russia to Israel. Had a stop in Vienna, and from Vienna you had to go to Israel. Certainly I was brought to the Israeli embassy, met by the ambassador and all the people from Austrian community. And then the ambassador asked me, what would you like to have like your first, request? Somebody is being put to death, has his last request. Somebody is being released, certainly has his first request. What would you ask for, like a bottle of vodka or maybe a tart or something? I told, you know what, it's soon sundown, and for 11 years I had no privilege to put on tefillin, so please produce me tefillin, So the ambassador looked around, like who will have on the spot a tefillin. All of a sudden, an American Jew, Rabbi Israel Singer, at that time was the director executive of World Jewish Congress, and the World Jewish Congress was instrumental in my release and negotiated my release, Edgar Bronfman, etc. Interestingly, he told, before coming to see you, I contacted the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I told I am coming to see Mendelevich, what to bring him. And the Rebbe told, bring him tefillin. So it's the tefillin that the Rebbe sent you. Yeah. Unbelievable, right? And later on, I understood how he would know. It turned out, it's a small story, but a very interesting story. We had that time one famous refusenik, Yitzhak Kogan. We called them Tzaddik from Leningrad. He used to be an engineer in nuclear submarines in Soviet Russia, a scientist. And all of a sudden, something happened to him, and he got involved in shchita, in ritual slaughtering, So who knows, you see any connection between nuclear submarines and slaughtering? Nothing. So the Rebbe sent a missionary to check, maybe he's feeding people with something with really not kosher food. So the missionary came, and Yitzhak told me later that he studied shchita from old people in Georgia. In Georgia, they were real knowledgeable people, so he did know how to do that. And the missionary was astonished, what a beautiful job. And Yitzhak Kogan even taught other Russian Jewish scientists, refuseniks, to do that. So it was really, enterprise in the end of the 70s. And then the missionary told, I will tell the Rebbe, he will certainly bless you. And then Yitzhak told, and later on he told me, I told the missionary, the shaliach, please, better bless Mendelevich. He is now under prolonged hunger strike. He has to stop his hunger strike, and he should be released. So you can watch YouTube. It is in English and in Hebrew, telling Yitzhak Kogan telling the story, and he smiles and he would admit, I heard that Lubavitcher Rebbe can produce miracles, so I decided to test him, Since then, I would never test him, For I am free, thanks the tremendous effort of the whole Jewish people. People admit, Sovietologists admit that it was the main reason to break the Soviet Union. Worldwide struggle for human rights, for freedom of immigration, for Am Yisrael. Thank you, thank God. Let us continue to be together, to be united, and to continue our fight. Now, somebody is interested to have my book. Is a signature very important.
Okay, friends, so Yosef Mendelevich has this wonderful book that he wrote that you can purchase for $40. Cash would be preferable. He doesn't have a processing machine. It's an incredible read, and he will inscribe it for you to autograph it as well. And there are some books in Russian. What a privilege.